Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the Holistic Method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey there, it's your host, Debbie Potts, and I want to give you a little info before we get started on the new episode we have for you today. I'm so excited to share with you that I am a presenter at Ketocon, and it's coming July 8th to July 10th in Austin, Texas, 2022 at the Palmer Event Center. Ketocon is an annual event, usually held in Austin, Texas, and they're the largest conference in the U.S. focused just on the science and the stories of keto. And they'll have 50 speakers and over 250 qualified keyword keto vendors. So there won't be a bunch of keto labeled junk for you. So this is a great conference to be a part of, meet your community, your tribe. It's pretty amazing. And the speakers are impressive. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach when you do keto. As we talk about on this show, the Low Carb Athlete Podcast is about all things keto, but also lifestyle habits. And this conference will give you a lot of information that we are all unique. We all have unique needs and preferences. Ketocon is going to teach us that. It's the absolutely best place to meet your like-minded people, your tribe, your people that you love to connect with in person. Learn about strategies for success and how to gather all the tools that you need to get the support you need to lead this healthy, fit lifestyle, to help you reach your goals to be fit and healthy from the inside out. You'll be surrounded by thousands of people who are equally excited and motivated about improving their lives. So trust me, this is a great event you don't want to miss out on. Use my code Low Carb Athlete, capital L, Low Carb Athlete, all one word, on checkout, and you will get 10% off each ticket in your order. And it will apply to a 1-day, 3-day, or VIP passes. So be sure to click on the link in the show notes, get your ticket, get your airfare while the prices are low, get your hotel rooms close to the conference so you can meet me, and we'll go for morning runs and do some outdoor strength workouts and have a great time, plus eat amazing barbecue. So the code will be active until July 1st, 2022, but I would register now. Get that travel details all set up, and we will see you there, as I will be talking about tips and tricks to fuel, train, and perform as a low-carb athlete. So see you there. And now let's get to the show. Hey, it's Debbie, the host of your show you're listening to, the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, and I am a big fan, obviously, of testing and not guessing. And that means doing lab testing, functional lab testing, labs that your doctor does not run. And I know because I just went to a new doctor where we just moved to last year, North San Diego, and they did none of the tests that I really wanted. And I had to ask for some blood markers, and they didn't really do any of what I wanted. And the results that I got back, they didn't do anything about. So finding a good doctor and working with functional medicine doctor and putting that together with a health coach is really beneficial. I'm finding myself to get the desired results if you really want to be fit and healthy from the inside out. But also looking at what foods we eat. We talk about being low carb. We talk about keto, metabolic efficiency, metabolic flexibility, eating fat to burn fat, all of that. But what about foods that you may be eating that are healthy, but they are a source of inflammation? They cause your immune system to react in, of course, a negative way and contribute to chronic inflammation in your body. So it could be all sorts of different random symptoms that you might be experiencing, like dry skin, having, migraines, having joint pain. All these different symptoms could be related to what we are eating and that it's contributing to leaky gut. And leaky gut can lead to other problems downstream. So we want to always talk about when we're eating. We talk about fasting, intermittent fasting, carb timing with our exercise. We talk about how to eat. Not enough, we don't talk about this, but eating slowly and mindfully versus mindlessly, and not rushing and multitasking when we eat. We're not driving our car and throwing something down and working out and then trying to wolf down lunch. It is really important to look at, as I just said, how, why, when, what we eat. But we need to look at inflammatory foods in your body that are reactive. So today, Whitney and I are going to talk about the wheat Zoomer test results that I did with Vibrant Wellness. Now, you can only order these labs through a functional medicine practitioner, FDN practitioner, and really helps because we want to look at multiple labs. So this is only one lab test that we're going over today, but I know if you go the past year of the podcast, you'll find the GI map. We did thyroid lab test with Dr. Amy and organic acids test and mold toxicity. I've talked about these different things because yes, it's low carb athlete podcast, but if you're interested in optimizing your health and performance longevity, you're trying to burn fat, and what if you're doing all these right things and you're not getting results? So we want to look at the big picture, look at all these different factors that we want to take in account when we're trying to create a protocol and a program for our athletic lifestyle to make sure we are improving our performance, but also looking at improving our longevity. What is your life going to be like 10, 20, 30 years from now? So we want to work on taking action, taking ownership of our health now, so we're not creating damage, all this oxidative stress that we create from exercise and leading a busy lifestyle. We want to be proactive and not wait until you're damaged goods to do something. So we want to start now. So we're going to talk about the wheat Zoomer. And the wheat Zoomer is a test we'll go over from Vibrant Wellness, as well as different Zoomers. So you zoom in onto the parts of a food, the peptides. And I just recently did the wheat Zoomer, and I did egg, dairy, corn, and I did a food sensitivity panel, which you need to find those red flag foods, remove them for 90 days, and then reintroduce them after you heal and seal your gut. But we can't really get much better if we keep eating these foods that are reactive until we do the right program and retest and make sure everything's good, optimal levels again. So wheat, are you gluten-free? Are you wheat-free? Do you eat foods in a house that are wheat-free? You're trying to do gluten-free, wheat-free, but there's other products in your house that have wheat. So we're going to talk about what other foods are cross-contaminated with gluten if you do react with gluten. So there's lots of information we can go into, but I think it's an important part to look at cross-reactive foods as well as just avoiding gluten. So gluten cross-reactive foods, I'll just throw in as I open up from Dr. Amy Myers, and Dr. Perlmutter talks about this, but gluten cross-reactive foods may be the surprising root cause of your symptoms. If you're following a gluten-free diet but still experiencing symptoms of gluten exposure as brain fog, headaches, digestion issues, rashes, weakness, joint pain, swelling, or fatigue, then gluten cross-reactivity might be part of the issue. So you may just not need to avoid gluten. You think you're avoiding gluten, but what if there's foods that your body sees as gluten? So there's a great article I can put in our show notes from Dr. Amy Myers, MD, on gluten cross-reactive foods, and Dr. Perlmutter has a good one. But really interesting on gluten that causes leaky gut. We'll talk about zonulin today in the show, toxins, microbes, food particles such as gluten and cross-reactive foods in our bloodstream. Our immune system marks them as dangerous invaders, creating inflammation to get rid of them, and what we can do about it. So we'll talk about all that, but I just want to throw in some information that Whitney and I will go over. Gluten cross-reactive foods includes dairy products as milk and cheese, corn, millet, oats, rice, yeast. And I think you need to do a food elimination plan. Is easy. It's free. You just take them out and then reintroduce them. Notice how you feel. But doing a lab test as a Zoomer only costs about $200. I did a 4-panel Zoomer test, and I found it's about $400 plus lab fees. We say it's $500 test. And we'll go into that a little bit more. But let me introduce Whitney, so I'll stop talking. But I think Whitney's a great person. She's one of my mentors from FDN. She is our go-to person for me when I do lab testing. We do a consult with our lab experts, and she's one of them. And Whitney talks about chronic inflammation in her workplace, and she says, great information as if you struggle with chronic inflammation in your body, various locations, one of the culprits could be what you're eating each day. Whitney Morgan, she's a founder of Morgan Nutrition, the creator of the Thyroid Reboot Method. She's helped dozens of women with chronic Hashimoto's and other autoimmune conditions bust through their obstacles, keeping them from the life they want by uncovering the root causes of their symptoms and eliminating their unique triggers. Whitney is a licensed acupuncturist, a functional nutritionist, certified gluten-free health coach. In addition to her private practice, she serves as a clinical advisor and instructor, as I just said, for the Association of Functional Diagnostic Nutrition Practitioners, also known as AFDNP. So let's dive into what is a food that you're eating. Is it causing you any additional source of stress, hidden stressors in your body that can be contributing to poor recovery repair? I've experienced running performance issues since my adrenal exhaustion started in 2013. I used to be able to do a 1:33 half marathon was my best time. A marathon, my best time was 3:12 in Boston, and 3:17 was my next time after that. And did Ironmans multiple times, 15 Ironmans, and I don't know how many marathons, 50K runs. So I could do well, strong biker, strong runner, but stronger at biking. People would always catch up on a run, but I could still do pretty good pace. Now I've struggled for years trying to get that pace back. And part of that journey I've been on is figuring out the why. What is holding me back, in not blaming the aging process and accept this as my new normal. So I think part of it is my lab test we'll go over today. Wheat Zoomer going over leaky gut markers, go over my body's response to gluten products, peptides, and the wheat parts of wheat. And I think it's super fascinating to know what's going on inside. And so I wanted to share, be totally open, my test results. And so you need to probably watch this ideally on the YouTube channel, Low Carb Athlete, to learn more. But we'll talk about the signs and symptoms of leaky gut for athletes and how endurance athletes are a little more prone to leaky gut. And I think, I've talked about taking glutamine and really being proactive in your gut health as an athlete, taking bone broth and having different supplements that you can do to improve your gut wall lining. We'll talk about wheat versus gluten versus celiac sensitivities and look at IgG antibodies versus IgA and IgE. Look at vitamin D levels, how that is impacted by your gut health. And so we're going to go over all this today and what to do about it. So if you have more questions after you listen to the show, reach out to me. We can do a free consultation to discover more. If you go to debbiepotts.net, you can learn all about my health detective work as I help athletes that are driven and ambitious, high-performing individuals that are struggling to get the results they are looking for, even though they're doing all the right things. So we investigate what is actually going on under the hood by looking at the whole picture. So I call it the Holistic Method coaching program to make sure that you are fit and healthy from the inside out. So Let me know your questions, comments, and feedback after you watch the show. And if you could, go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review so we can start making a comeback on iTunes, since I took a few months off and there's 20,000 plus other podcasts to listen to out there. So I need your help sharing this information out there. So I appreciate your help and support and love to hear from you. Enjoy the show. Okay, everyone. I'm thrilled to have Whitney, one of my mentors from our FDN practitioner program. And I'll go through all her certifications, trainings, and knowledge you have, Whitney, but you are coming on the show to talk about the wheat Zoomer panel I've done on myself. And we're going to talk about gluten sensitivity and all things leaky gut for the athlete specifically, because we'll learn that there's so much information we get from doing this lab test by a Vibrant Wellness, or there's other tests, but this is one we love to do. And I think for athletes, we think we're invincible. We think we're training all the time, that we're fit and healthy. And often we are not healthy on the inside. And that endurance exercise can also impact our gut health. So we're going to talk about all of these things today, because I know everyone wants to lose fat, improve their performance, get stronger, get faster, improve that aging process. So Whitney, thanks for coming on the show to dive into the facts about our gut health and the impacts of gluten and wheat sensitivities.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Super excited.
So let's kind of talk about what is the wheat Zoomer test that we're going to dive into. My test is a great example. And what is gluten versus wheat sensitivity to get started? Kind of what's it all about?
Sure. Yeah. So, I'm sure you've had this experience when clients come to you that they may have said, hey, my doctor checked me for gluten sensitivity and everything was fine. Well, the wheat Zoomer is very unique. There's only one other lab that does a test similar to it, that it breaks apart the wheat protein and the gluten protein into all of its little pieces. These are called peptides. And it tests for the immune reaction to all the peptides of wheat and gluten. And the reason why this is so important is because you can test negative in terms of how you react to the whole food protein, but you can be having extreme reactions to the peptides of that whole food. And the way I explain it is, imagine the whole food is like a puzzle that's all put together and you can see the picture, right? And then you break that puzzle apart and all you have are all the pieces. Each individual piece of that puzzle is a peptide, and it's very unique in how it presents to the immune system. So if you really want to find out if you're wheat and gluten sensitive, you need to zoom in, which is why it's called the wheat Zoomer. You need to zoom into the peptide level of sensitivity if you want the accurate data.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people hear about food sensitivity tests, and then they get that information, remove those foods that are ranked the highest, that they're inflammatory to the body, take that out for 90 days, then reintroduce them slowly. Yeah. But what is the difference between a food sensitivity test and a Zoomer? What can we get out of it? You just basically said a lot of it, but maybe more specific between the two.
Well, most food sensitivity tests out there are looking at whole food antigens, right? And when you're really reactive to a bunch of different whole foods, that actually says more about your digestion and your leaky gut than anything else. Because in theory, our immune systems should not really come into contact with a whole food protein, because your digestion should be breaking it down and it shouldn't be able to get through the gut lining, right, and go into the bloodstream. So if you have a lot of food sensitivities at the whole food level, it really means, hey, your gut's pretty leaky and your digestion probably isn't very good. So yeah, remove those foods for 90 to 120 days, improve digestion, heal and seal the gut. And in theory, you should be able to reintroduce most of those foods, not all of them, but most of them.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people might do that, and then they try to just go back to their old eating habits, and then they just get stuck to where they were 3 months before, or realize there's still symptoms, which can be far removed from what's going on. Like it could be skin issues or brain fog, migraines, and all these other different things that we don't correlate that goes with our gut health and what foods we're eating. So kind of with the next step, I think, on that conversation would be leaky gut. What is leaky gut? And we call it leaky gut, but it's not really the true name. So let's kind of dive into what that all means and how it impacts our health.
Sure. So leaky gut just means kind of a hyperpermeability of the gut. It means that there's some dysregulation or damage to the gut lining. And so large, partially digested proteins or large toxins are getting through that normally wouldn't be able to get through. And if you think about the gut, most people think, okay, well, the gut's in my stomach. Well, no, it really runs from the mouth all the way to the anus, right? I mean, it's this one long tube, and it's our primary interface with the outside world. It really is exposed to the external environment, right? So we bring food and chemicals and all kinds of stuff into the gut environment. Well, that's why the gut lining is so important, because it's designed to keep the bad guys out while it, breaks down and assimilates all the good guys. And then what shouldn't get into the bloodstream passes through in the stool or goes to the urine, right? I mean, that's how it's supposed to work. Well, in leaky gut, it doesn't really work that way. We have these little holes along the way. Think of it as like, I know Dr. Tom O'Brien explains it this way. You have a screen in your window, right? It's supposed to keep all the bugs and stuff out. Well, if the screen is kind of broken down and you have these little holes and, things get through, that's kind of how you can think about leaky gut, right?
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, most people are walking around with a leaky gut to some extent.
But how do we know if we have one or not without testing?
Sure.
We're just guessing, but what are some symptoms?
Right. So the tricky thing is that the symptoms can be just so diverse, right? You can have headaches, migraines, fatigue, inability to concentrate, just like foggy thinking. You can have irritability, anxiety, panic attacks. So those are all kind of neurological things. Then you can have joint pain, muscle pain. You can have classic digestive stuff like gas and bloating. You can have skin issues, so eczema, itching, various rashes, dermatitis, psoriasis, things like that. So the symptoms are just all over the map. But when you're trained as a clinician and someone's telling you all about their symptoms, you tend to get this picture emerging where you're like, oh yeah, that's a sign, that's a sign, that's a sign, right? And you get enough kind of red flags. And that's a good indication that, yeah, we should probably do some testing, because one of the primary triggers for leaky gut is the food that we choose to eat, right? And that's the thing we have control over. And then there's a lot of dietary and lifestyle stuff beyond that, like sleep and exercise. They impact the gut quite a bit.
Speaking of exercise, we were talking about this before we recorded, but the athlete, as I said, thinks that they're often, superhuman, invincible, because we exercise, we are healthy. But what I've learned over the years, and it kind of makes sense for what happened to me, is that we're training a lot. So you're doing Ironmans, marathon, long distance endurance work. We're putting a lot of time out there, and often training in hotter weather. And especially like I was doing Ironman in Hawaii every year, and doing, races in Kona and different places, that we don't know it, or I didn't know it, that I was actually increasing the damage to my gut wall lining and probably causing leaky gut, even though I thought I was so healthy, eating great food, doing lower carbs, not eating the crappy processed foods and sugars. But let's talk about the athlete, how they're not always good to have a healthy gut just because of their nutrition.
Yeah, and that's tricky, because most endurance athletes, like you said, they're used to training at high levels, and so what they think of as moderate exercise would probably, lay me out flat on the floor, right? So they're used to a different level of activity, and they've normalized it. But the thing is that, like, when I work with athletes, I talk about it this way. Like, okay, well, if you're a marathon runner and you get a Achilles tendon injury or whatever, you get an injury that you can't train at that level anymore, and you have to actually do some physical therapy in order to get back to a place and heal where you can now adapt and train the way you previously were training. Well, it's the same is true when you're in this cycle of overtraining. it really damages the hypothalamus adrenal pituitary axis, right? The HPA axis. It damages the thyroid pathways as well, disrupts the endocrine system, absolutely increases oxidative damage, which breaks down the gut lining. These are all like little micro injuries, but we can't feel them. We can't see them. They don't have a specific location in terms of how they show up as symptoms in the body, right? So in order to really assess whether or not your level of exercise is putting too much stress on your body and kind of digging you into a hole, you really do need to collect the data. You need to look at your adrenal system. You need to look at your thyroid function. You need to look at those oxidative stress markers, those inflammatory markers. You need to look at a panel that shows whether or not you have a leaky gut, because it really is the data that that brings everything out into the light. Otherwise, we will never know until we reach that critical point where just the wheels fall off the bus. Suddenly, you're fatigued, you can't exercise, you have poor recovery, you're getting injury after injury, you can't think straight, and you're like, what the heck is going on with me?
That was me in 2013. Yeah. I'm like, wait, you're describing exactly what happened to me. The wheels came off March 2013, and I had no idea that what I was doing years before that, just suddenly everything just fell apart and created metabolic chaos. We call it kind of the catch-all phrase for it, but it's my mission now to help other athletes avoid going through what I've gone through since, it's almost 8 years, that it's just so not spoken about, that athletes need to be aware of what you're doing now. Is it causing more damage than good? And how to take ownership of your health to be fit and healthy from the inside out, and doing this testing, because most people don't seem to be doing it as athletes. They just, follow their training schedule from their coach using Training Peaks or whatever, and just go by that. And they don't look at the whole picture until you are broken, the wheels fell off. But I want to help people before their wheels fall off. Maybe one wheel comes off and not all four.
Yeah. And really, in a perfect world, if you're like, okay, I'm going to be an athlete, that's my mission, that's who I am, well, then we should be running labs on you every year. We should be monitoring your adrenals. We should be monitoring your oxidative stress levels. We should be doing all of that, just like you do your annual blood work with your doctor, your CBC and your CMP, just for general health. Yeah. If you are a high performance athlete, you should commit to a certain investment in terms of very unique, specific data that is going to impact the trajectory of your performance long term. And if you do that now, if you start doing that now and acting on that data, then it's less likely you're ever going to hit a wall where the wheels fall off, right?
Yeah. But people don't think that way. They just will drop 15,000 on a bike and their equipment, and they think nothing, like, $2,000 on some labs. No way. I'm like, well, how much were those race wheels that you're riding every week costing you? How much is that new bike? Yeah. So I just looked at a bike at truck store, and they're not cheap. They're at least $10,000. So, people won't do it. And it's hard to really teach people, don't wait until you're stuck in the hole and not be able to race. Like, I've never been able to do a marathon or Ironman again. And it's, it's not probably good for me anyways, but what if I wanted to do it once in a while? My body can't. But if you want to continue that and work on performance and longevity, we need to take ownership of our health and to do some labs. Which I must add before I give back to you, I did current blood work with the doctor just because I'm paying all this ridiculous money for insurance. Yeah. Like, I'll go get a checkup, and we haven't seen a doctor here yet. So I went, and I was so disgusted that I did lab work. They don't even do insulin. They do A1C, and they don't do insulin. They didn't do the inflammatory markers. They don't even do vitamin D. And then I got the results back on the portal from Kaiser, and they didn't go over them with me. I'm like, what? I know how to put them in our spreadsheet we use for FDN. I have on my little cheat sheet, what if it's high or low, and do all this stuff for myself. I'm like, no wonder why everyone's screwed up in our country, not being at optimal health levels, because their doctors just do this stuff and just leave them.
Yeah. Well, and you just said the magic word, Debbie. You said optimal health. That's not what those labs are for. Those labs are to identify disease and pathology. So as long as you land within these wide standard reference ranges, you're normal, meaning we can't diagnose you with anything. there's nothing wrong with that paradigm. We do want to be able to diagnose people when they fall into, extreme areas on the range, but that is not a paradigm that's set up to optimize your health long term. That's just not, you know?
I don't know. So anyways, this is a side note, but let's go back to the wheat zoomer.
Yeah.
I want to go over why we test the wheat zoomer. We'll use my lab as an example because I went through my thyroid panel with Dr. Amy a couple months ago and just went through that. And I think it's important to look at this as an example of someone that thinks, they're eating healthy, they're doing intermittent fasting, they're doing their strength training, their yoga and all this stuff. And that's what I always say, what I do helping people is that I help people think they're doing all the right things and they're still not getting results to get their body environment self back. But let's go over the gluten test where it'll show wheat. Should we just pull it up and just get started and you can explain it as we go? So I'm going to share screens. Hopefully you guys watch this on the YouTube channel, Low Carb Athlete. And we can zoom into the zoomer.
Yeah. So can you see this okay?
Yeah. If you can make it look, can you make it a little bigger?
Yeah.
For us that are 50 now.
How's that? Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So the wheat zoomer is very cool. It's doing multiple things. We're looking at non-gluten sensitivity. We're looking at gluten sensitivity, leaky gut, and also wheat lectin sensitivity. So we've got a lot of different things going on. But the summary page, this gives you a score. Your wheat zoomer score is based on basically summarizing all of your results. So they have an algorithm that assigns a different weight to each antigen, right? So it's kind of like, think of it as taking a final exam. Your essay questions are worth more than your multiple choice, which is worth more than your true or false. So there are some antigens on this test that are weighted heavier. So I'm not sure what their algorithm is specifically, but you've hit the red zone, right? You are what we would call significantly or severely reactive, which means your exposure and your reaction are high. Then we have a separate intestinal permeability score, same sort of thing. It's an algorithm, and your summary score is also in the red. So very leaky, very wheat and gluten reactive. Then we have, this is the summary of the different antigens, what you were reactive to, moderately or positive, and then what you're negative to. So while we're on this page, you'll notice I just want to take a couple of seconds and talk about the difference between IgA and IgG. So IgA and IgG are two different aspects of our immune system. You can think of IgA as first responders. They're quick on the scene, quick off the scene. IgG take longer to form in the bloodstream, and they stick around for a long time. They stick around for up to 6 months in the bloodstream. And IgA usually leaves the bloodstream within 6 or 12 days. Okay. So these are both telling slightly different parts of the same story, right? So just looking at what you're reacting to, I can see, okay, well, you've got both IgA and IgG antibodies. That tells me that probably within the 2 weeks prior to this blood draw, you were exposed to, you had a gluten exposure or a wheat exposure. And that's why we're still seeing some residual IgA antibodies in the bloodstream, okay? The IgG reactions, well, that's telling me that you probably have had multiple exposures over the past 6 months, at least one, but probably more. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing that the wheat zoomer shows us is zonulin levels. Now, zonulin is an enzyme that regulates the tight junctions in between the cells that line our gut. These are like little gateways, and only certain things are allowed to pass through. So these gateways have to be very rigorously kind of regulated. So zonulin does some of that. Well, when we're exposed to gluten, zonulin goes up in the gut environment, and we get a lot of hyper dysregulation of those gateways. So think of it as, okay, those gates get stuck open or they start to get damaged and break down, right? So now we have in between each of the cells, we have these, gaping holes where there used to be tightly regulated junctions, okay? So the fact that your zonulin is elevated also confirms for me that, yeah, you probably had a gluten exposure in the period, leading up to the test, probably within 6 to 12 days of doing the blood draw. Okay. All right. So the wheat zoomer itself is broken into several different panels. These first two panels are specific for celiac disease. Now, celiac disease is different than being gluten sensitive or wheat sensitive. The way I like to think of it is wheat sensitivity is the big umbrella. Underneath that umbrella, you have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, and you have celiac disease. And then, variations of that. But celiac disease is a specific type of gluten sensitivity that indicates that you now have an autoimmune process going on in the gut that's damaging the gut lining severely. It's an autoimmune disease that attacks the gut lining. That's how gluten impacts celiacs, okay? So these first two panels are telling us, is this person likely to have celiac disease? Obviously, you do not. Yours are both negative. Okay, so that's great. And I would expect that in most wheat zoomers because only 1% of the population has celiac disease. So most people that we're testing are non-celiac gluten sensitive. Okay.
Got it.
Now here's your intestinal permeability panel. Now you've got a lot of red here, right? You've got both IgA and IgG reactions to zonulin. You also have an IgG reaction to actin. So actin is a protein that supports the tight junctions and it supports kind of the cellular structure of the gut lining. So when you have antibodies to actin, that's an indicator that you probably have some damage of the cellular structure themselves. And so things are leaking through the gut, through the cells, not just through the gateways between the cells, but through the cellular structure, right? So you've got transcellular and paracellular leakage. Is that pretty clear?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's amazing.
Yeah. This next panel is a transglutaminase panel. This is not gluten per se, but these enzymes are reparative enzymes that can correlate with autoimmune diseases of the brain and of the skin. Your panel is negative. That's good. Okay.
So then some people might see that moderate to high risk, and they might correlate that with any, like if they have psoriasis, eczema, yes, or brain fog or migraines.
Yeah, any sort of neurological symptoms. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so the first page I think of as, okay, this is really autoimmune focused, right? Because all of these things increase or verify that you are at greater risk of autoimmune disease. Anyone with a leaky gut automatically is at greater risk of developing autoimmune disease anywhere in the body. Okay. Then we have our wheat germ agglutinin panel. Now yours is negative, and on most people, it's positive. So that's a little bit of good news. Wheat germ agglutinin is the lectin of the wheat protein. It's not gluten, right? And it's not just plain old wheat. It's a lectin. It's very specific. So lectins are pretty destructive to the gut lining. They break down the gut lining. When they get through the gut lining, they can go anywhere in the body. They can break down the blood-brain barrier. And wheat germ lectins follow sugar, right? So wherever sugar goes in the body, lectins can go too. And wheat germ is the big bad lectin of all the plant lectins because there's practically no tissue or organ in the body that wheat germ can attach to. So this is one way in which autoimmune disease starts. So it looks like this. Okay, wheat germ breaks down the gut lining, gets through, goes into the bloodstream, goes to the thyroid, attaches to the thyroid. The immune system is patrolling. It sees the wheat germ there and goes, whoa, you don't belong there. Bang, 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 bang. And then the thyroid tissue gets destroyed in the process as collateral damage. Now we have Hashimoto's.
Oh,
okay. Same thing can happen in the brain with multiple sclerosis. It can happen in the pancreas, type 1 diabetes. It can happen in the joints, rheumatoid arthritis. Anywhere where the wheat germ goes, it can provoke an immune response that leads to an autoimmune progression. Okay.
Interesting. So people should look at their full thyroid panel to correlate the two together, and if they have other symptoms of autoimmune.
Oh yeah. And most people who have been diagnosed as hypothyroid and they are gluten sensitive, most cases that person is actually Hashimoto's. They just have never gotten the diagnosis. Okay. All right. So then we have the actual gluten panels. So if you take the gluten protein, which is a big kind of clunky protein, it breaks down into all these peptides, gliadin peptides and glutenin peptides. Some people pronounce this gliadin, but anyway. So all of these peptides are gluten. If you put them all together, they would make up that gluten puzzle, right? So you're reacting to alpha gliadin, alpha beta, and gamma gliadin. You're also reactive to gluteomorphin, and then you have this high molecular weight glutenin reactivity. All of this just tells me you are gluten sensitive and you have had a significant exposure to gluten within 2 weeks before taking this test and probably several times within the last 6 months, right? Because your antibody levels are pretty high. Now, interesting about some of these peptides is that gamma gliadin tends to correlate more with neurological autoimmunity. Gluteomorphin tells me that gluten stimulates the opioid receptors in your brain. So for people who have these gluteomorphin or protonorphin reactions, they are actually addicted to the gluten, and they can, these are the folks that might stress eat. They might feel better if they have something carby. Maybe that's their way to kind of numb or self-medicate. But it also means that when you go off gluten, you can have physical withdrawal symptoms for several weeks, and you can get flu-like symptoms, achy, headaches, all kinds of stuff, and feel pretty crappy.
Hey, quick question.
Sure.
So that's IgA glutamorphin for me that was rated a little higher. But what about if you have history of, like, I just had a flashback of college when I thought I was being so healthy, doing everything fat-free, and all I ate really was bagels.
Yeah.
Bagels and rice and popcorn with water sprayed on it and Johnny seasoning salt.
Oh my God.
I thought, fat-free diet back then. I was, high school graduate, 89. So it's been a while, but that's back then. We thought we were so healthy. But would anything we've been like, I don't know how you research it, but I'm just curious if you ate like the high carb diet and lots of wheat growing up, if that impacts some of these results as an adult.
That's a really good question. We don't know how long your immune system has been reacting this way, right? It could have been since you were a teenager, if we had this test back then, that it would have looked like this. Or it could be that, hey, you're an endurance athlete and you overtrained for a long period of time and systems were breaking down and your gut lining was breaking down and things were, you were in that metabolic chaos place, but you didn't know it. And then boom, now you've got this raging gluten sensitivity, so it could have happened at any point during your life. We don't know. All we can do is reverse engineer it, to the best of our ability based on your symptoms and your health history.
Yeah.
But something triggered it, and exercise could very well be the thing that did it.
Can you just step back a moment? So I think this is a good point, 'cause most athletes overtrain.
Yeah.
So overtraining, how does that give us a gluten sensitivity? It's not necessarily from eating so much gluten. You're saying you can become gluten sensitive because of overtraining, breaks down your body system because of the high stress, oxidative stress, and it breaks down your gut wall lining.
Yeah. So if you think of it as like a perfect storm, right? So in order to reach like that critical tipping point, you have to have certain dominoes that get lined up, right? And so it could go something like this. You have a genetic predisposition in the first place, right? And hello, gluten causes a leaky gut in everybody, whether or not you're sensitive to it, because it raises zonulin levels. So if you go through your young teenage and early 20s, eating nothing but bagels and, the low fat, high carb diet with a lot of gluten, and you're also an athlete, then at some point along the way, whether it's a combination of, okay, your overtraining has impacted your adrenals, which has impacted your thyroid, which has slowed down your metabolic repair. It's dysregulated blood sugar. It's increased your zonulin, and you've got these gluten proteins swimming around. They get through the gut lining, and your immune system is out on high patrol because there's a lot of inflammation in the body and it's trying to protect you, right? And so you reach this point where the immune system just goes, okay, we have to protect ourselves. So now we're going to be hypervigilant, and we are going to clean up everything that could be a potential invader. And all you need are some of these peptides floating around in the bloodstream or attached anywhere in the body, right? Like wheat germ, anything like that. Then the immune system tags it. Once gluten is tagged as a bad guy, it's forever. So gluten is the only food we know of so far that creates these memory B cells. So whenever it's triggered in the body, whether you are 18 or 25, it doesn't matter how well you heal and seal your gut. Gluten is always going to be a potential immune provoker for you because it's encoded, it's wired in already, right? So this is forever.
I think it's such a good, everything you just said, people need to rewind and listen again, because I think most of us as endurance athletes would just think, people in general just think gluten-free lifestyle is just a trend. It's not for real. And they don't put that together. It's like, oh, my memory is horrible. I have total brain fog. My eyesight's bad. I've got, skin issues, and I take forever to recover from a workout. And for me, it was always like, I can't run. My running has never been the same. I used to be a fast runner. Now it's like slog. So I think putting that together, it could be some inflammation you're causing from what you're eating, and then your gut health.
Yeah. I mean, I could say the same thing about when I, in my 20s. I mean, I wasn't an athlete like you were, but I was addicted to running, and I was running 90 minutes a day, 4 or 5 days a week. Wow. It was just ridiculous. So that I was definitely overtraining, but I felt pretty good. But shortly, I don't know, after like 3 or 4 years of behaving that way, then I started getting anxiety. Well, I didn't connect anxiety attacks to overtraining, nor did I connect it to all of the, whole wheat I was eating, the whole grains I was eating, right? Anxiety was the first symptom I had of my celiac disease.
Interesting.
Right? I had never had a digestive issue with gluten ever.
Wow.
So it's always been neurological and then skin. And that's pretty common, actually. It's called silent celiac disease. So I think that's part of the problem is athletes will start to get little symptoms like that. Like, hey, I'm having difficulty concentrating in school, or, I'm having trouble sleeping, or I'm getting anxiety attacks. They don't connect that to their overtraining or their diet, because these things are seemingly unrelated, but they're very related. Right.
Yeah. I've noticed that over the years, doing all these different educational programs. Like, okay, why do I keep studying and I'm not smart? How come I have to go over everything 100 times to get it in my head? That there's like, that's not normal. And you don't blame, that's just how my brain is. I'm just not a smart person and I'm not a slow learner. There's something else to go with it.
And two, I think, because of the way our medical system is set up, unfortunately, like in my case, I had anxiety. So what did I do? I went to a psychiatrist and a psychologist, right? Because obviously the problem is here, right? In my brain. Well, no, it wasn't, but that's the way we're trained to do it. If we have pain in our joints, we go to a rheumatologist or a chiropractor or an orthopedist, or someone who specializes in the area where their symptom has manifested. But that doesn't mean that's the origin of the problem. That's so there is a disconnect in our traditional medical system, right? We mistake the symptom for the problem.
Yeah.
And that's just not always the case.
That's you. I was going to take it off my screen. I'm like, wait, that's your screen. So let's go on. I know there's so much
Yeah.
cover in here.
So this is the final panel, and this is the non-gluten wheat panel. Okay, so these are not gluten peptides, these are wheat peptides. And you can see that you are reactive. You're reactive to the serpins and also the amylase protease inhibitors. Interestingly, amylase protease inhibitor reactivity does correlate with an inability to burn fat. So if you're an athlete that just no matter how much you train, you can't, get the scale to budge, and you're consuming wheat and gluten, this could be part of your problem. It's not your only problem, but it could be part of it.
I must say, since I started making sure there's no wheat in our house and doing strict gluten free, because I wasn't, it's pregnant or you're not pregnant theory. I was
That's
never,
right.
I realized that we still would have it sometimes if we eat out, be in food. But anyways, I haven't been able to lose weight, and I work out a lot, I lift weights, and I do fasting, blah, blah, blah. But finally, my body's starting to drop some inches the last few months after 8 years of struggling, because I was lean and gained 30 pounds when my adrenal stuff's happened. And now I read that in our notes that, having this amylase, how you can start to lose weight. Plus it was supporting my thyroid and DHA, but it's just interesting how put it all together. It's like, it's just change the way you're eating, and you keep doing fasting and doing whatever low carb food plan, whatever your, eating is, and still don't lose weight. You think, oh, what's going on with me? I'm getting older.
What's going on? And you kind of hit on the trifecta, which is gluten sensitivity, thyroid impairment, and adrenal dysfunction. Those three things just go together because they become a vicious cycle. Because food sensitivities, particularly a gluten sensitivity, which is kind of the mob boss of the food world, right? When that's going on, that has a huge impact on your adrenals. Okay. And then when your adrenals become, imbalanced, or there's dysfunction in your adrenal pathway, that has a spillover effect to your thyroid. It actually decreases thyroid hormone production, and it reduces the self-sensitivity for thyroid hormone. So thyroid hormone can't get into the cells. And then your metabolic function just kind of downshifts, right? So now you're riding the brakes. So now you're not burning fat. And that has its own, that's the thyroid dysfunction is its own source of stress for the adrenals. So it just keeps going around in this vicious cycle. We don't see that all of those three things are connected.
Well, that's why I keep trying to say, you think you're doing all the right things, but it's still not getting any results. And the definition of insanity, I would say too, is that you keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results and not looking at all this hidden internal stressors causing dysfunction.
Yeah. And even when it comes to people who do what we do, Debbie, which is we test, right? We don't guess. There's two kinds of health coaches in this world. There are the ones that test and use lab verified data, and they're the ones that guess. They might be really good guessers, but they're still just guessing, right? So if you're picking a health coach, pick one that tests, okay? Because you want the data. But also you have to look at a wide variety of data, because it's not enough just to figure out, okay, what foods am I sensitive to? Or, okay, how screwed up are my adrenals, right? No one test is going to give you the complete picture, because all of these systems in your body are connected. So you really do need to do at least 4 or 5 different significant labs, in my opinion, to get a good kind of global view of what's going on in the body, so that now you can develop a holistic, comprehensive plan to start turning the ship around, right?
Yeah, for sure. So on here, so we know the amylase and the serpines, but the serpines versus what's the other one? Pharmins. I can't see. Pharmins, and then the other ones at the bottom. Does it matter? Like if you just have one of those, like I just have one, that means it doesn't matter. So it's just as long as one of them shows up on a panel, you are reactive.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. One peptide reaction is enough to say you are wheat sensitive. Just one of these peptides in either of these two panels is enough to confirm gluten sensitivity. Okay, so you are wheat sensitive and you are gluten sensitive. You do not have celiac disease. That's the only thing we can say. that we can rule out based on this panel, based on the data we have, I could say with probably 90% assurance that you are not on the road to having celiac disease. Okay, not now.
So is that kind of stop to look at wheat versus gluten? Do we, if we have the gluten ones and not the wheat, but we still need to avoid wheat because the gluten's part of wheat, does it make a difference, or tell us a little bit more?
It gets tricky in terms of application, right? How do you apply all of this data and live in the world, right? So when you go to restaurants and you buy food at the grocery store. So I look at these wheat zoomers all the time, not only in my private practice, but as a clinical advisor for FDN, I'm looking at other clinicians' wheat zoomer results and reviewing their cases with them. So I have the benefit of seeing a lot of these wheat zoomers that come through the FDN world. And from what I see, almost 95 to 99% of the people who are gluten sensitive are also wheat sensitive. Okay, so you can't really separate the two. This is really important for people who are out there eating those super green powders that are certified gluten-free, and these are athletes, right? Athletic greens, that's all over Instagram, right?
We've had that for a couple of years. That's wheat in it?
It has wheatgrass in it.
Crap.
The last time I looked at the ingredients, it had wheatgrass. Well, you can't take the wheat out of wheatgrass, right? It might not have gluten in it because the wheat hasn't matured to the point where the gluten is developed, and they extract the wheatgrass in a specialized way that, right, that they can eliminate at least less than 20 parts per million the gluten risk factor. So they can certify it gluten-free, but it's still full of wheat. So it's not good for you if you're gluten sensitive. You should not be consuming wheatgrass. No one should be if they're gluten sensitive, because 9 times out of 10, you're also wheat sensitive. I bet you.
Yeah, right.
yeah,
like
I know.
4 bags of that. So,
and there are even supplements. There are supplements that that a lot of health coaches use that have wheatgrass in them. Don't even go there.
Huh. Yeah. Interesting. I know when I order supplements now, I have to do the filter, and it's amazing how much nothing will show up. Sometimes what you're looking for, because there's wheat or corn and dairy and so many of those supplements that we take, and we have to be really cautious if we're reactive to it.
Yep. And it also means when you're reading labels, you have to be good at okay, yes, should you be buying things that are certified gluten-free? Yes. And those certified gluten-free products should not be produced in a facility that also processes wheat. So you have to look at the fine print, because something can be certified gluten-free, but still be contaminated with non-gluten wheat proteins due to manufacturing processes. So you kind of have to have this hierarchy of, right, of kind of investigating your labels, right?
Now, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you want it to be certified, but you also want to look at the fine print. Make sure that it's produced in a facility that does not process wheat.
Yeah, and that's hard to find. A lot of them are not. So when you look on my test, we look at the gluten, gliadin, the glutenin, and then the wheat one. So I didn't show up for wheat, did I? But so
yeah, you're wheat sensitive.
So the serpine.
You just didn't show up for the wheat germ.
Oh, the wheat germ. But how do you know I'm wheat sensitive?
Because these are all of the non-gluten wheat proteins. Wheat. Yeah. The wheat germ is the lectin of the wheat.
That's right.
Right.
And that's what we hear a lot about, lectins. From doctors.
So to further complicate all this, I just want to briefly say to people that gluten cross-reacts with a variety of different foods.
Yeah.
Cow dairy, corn, millet, rice, baker's yeast, brewer's yeast, and oats. So those are the main ones. So if you are gluten sensitive and wheat sensitive, which you are, you either need to test yourself for those other foods, which I know you already did, and that's good, or you should just eliminate them completely and just say, I'm just going to assume that I'm cross-reactive. I'm not going to eat corn or rice or millet or any of that stuff, right? Your safest bet is to go grain-free and adhere to a paleo or a primal template, because a lot of these grains they have so many different peptides that can confuse the immune system. The safest bet is just to get rid of them all if you really want to reduce the inflammation and the potential for other food sensitivities to crop up.
And that'd be a lot of the crackers that are out there, the wheat, they have the seeds in them, like Marigon crackers and like keto
well, I think
crackers.
Those are grain free, right?
To be grain.
Yeah, as long as you're opting for grain free stuff, you're a lot safer. But be careful. I mean, I've come across a lot of paleo stuff that's like quote unquote grain free, but yet it's produced in a facility that processes wheat. It's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
You know, it kind of defeats the purpose.
But that kind of goes to why people do a carnivore 30-day reset, because what's there left to eat? Because you can't do dairy, you can't do corn, you can't do rice, you can't do lectin. So what's there left? Animal meat that's grass-fed and wild-caught fish.
Yeah, some people have really, I think that kind of therapeutic intervention for short periods of time can be very healing for the gut.
Yeah.
Or you could just do an extended bone broth fast with collagen peptides. You don't necessarily have to, eat a bunch of animal flesh, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the best ways to kind of supercharge a gut healing protocol is to do a 3 to 5 day bone broth fast, because the cells in our gut turn over pretty quickly, right? And if we just stop bringing in food, if you're already a good intermittent faster, I mean, if you have the metabolic flexibility for intermittent fasting and you've got experience doing that, and you've done at least one 24-hour fast, I would say, hey, maybe experiment around with that and extend that to at least 3 days, somewhere between 3 and 5 days, because you're going to get a lot of gut healing.
Mm-hmm. We used to do that at my fitness studio, and I do it now. When I do my 5-day jumpstart challenge is teach people that and have that. And we did it before we really knew that much. We're doing it.
Right.
Angela Pfeiffer.
One thing I didn't mention that I want to make sure I say, and I would have mentioned it if you would have had a wheat germ reaction. Wheat germ is not only is it kind of a hormone signaling disruptor, and it sets the stage for autoimmune disease. It's super destructive in the body to tissues, but it also interferes with the absorption of vitamin D.
Yeah, I wrote that down. That was interesting.
So people with chronically low vitamin D levels, sometimes this is the culprit, and they're not going to fix that until they get off the wheat.
That's crazy. I know. I was so interested reading that. It's like, wait a minute, because I just got tested. I did get the doctor at least do my vitamin D, and I was only 44, which, I just had my dad finally get tested, and he was 20 something, and the doctor thought that was okay.
It's not okay.
That's fine. That's normal. You have heart disease and all this other stuff, but that's okay to have vitamin D that low. But mine, I thought, was still kind of low for being outside every day swimming. So I've been trying to do higher vitamin D supplements, but I think that's good information. Go look at your genetics, because I had the vitamin D receptor gene from both parents. I take vitamin D supplement once in a while, and I'm outside swimming at noon in San Diego sunshine 3-4 days a week. So why would my vitamin B still be low? Vitamin D, I would be interested to see, making sure I'm not having any wheat if that changes.
Right.
Even though my wheat germ panel wasn't bad, but good correlation.
Yeah, for vitamin D, the functional reference range is 50 to 100.
Mm-hmm.
And personally, I think the sweet spot is 60 to 80.
Yeah.
That's where I like to see it.
Yeah, that's what we're saying. So, okay. So I know the rest of this, the test, when people do it, they meet with it. You have to order it through a practitioner, and you do go through it. And we do it part of our investigation program as FDN practitioners. So we go through all of it together. So we're not just treating a lab, we're looking at the whole picture.
That's right.
But if you scroll down when's the last page? Because it has great information. I know, like us as coaches, it does show us information, and, it's good information, but I think just for someone doing the test can learn a lot too.
Oh yeah.
How it just gives a little summary. And like you tell us in our wheat germ program to save this information, because it's good info to look at the whole picture. But I think looking at IP, leaky gut panel, the potential risk related information and potential risk is good.
Yeah.
An
and
overview.
then what we need to do to correct it, right? I mean, certainly the most important thing is to remove things that are breaking down the gut lining. That's the most important thing. But then above and beyond that, we need to put stuff into the environment that's going to help repair and soothe the damage. So that's where your probiotics and your L-glutamine and your L-arginine, your omega-3s, also things like slippery elm and marshmallow root and zinc carnosine. And, you know, there are other things that usually are part of mucosal barrier formulas that do a lot of soothing, anti-inflammatory, healing, and repair activity.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and just that gives more. But just last couple minutes, I did do the Zoomer. So when we are ordering this for clients, as a practitioner side, I like to do the bundles, and I did the corn, the dairy. What I do?
Yeah, you did corn,
dairy.
You did corn and dairy. Yeah, you're gonna make it small so I can see. Scroll. Yeah, corn. And you're reactive to corn, so you should consider corn as the same thing as gluten for you. But yeah, you did the dairy.
A pattern though with the corn, when people are wheat gluten sensitive, that they see the corn on there too when they do the Zoomers? Is it because it's cross-reactive, or is it corn as corn itself, or is it?
No, there are 3 different peptides of corn that specifically cross-react with wheat and gluten. And I would say probably 85% or more people who are wheat or gluten sensitive are also sensitive to corn. And I think the same is true for dairy too. Those are the 2 main ones that I see most often. But when I run Zoomers on clients, yeah, I always run a minimum of 4. I always run the wheat and the corn, no matter what. If someone is consuming cow dairy, I always run the dairy. And then I'll either choose between the grain Zoomer or the lectin Zoomer, depending on the client, or I'll just do 5 Zoomers. You know, if the money is there, if the client wants to get the additional data and wants to spend the money, I'll do 5 Zoomers. Because it's just, you know, once if all you do is the wheat Zoomer, well, okay, you find out you're wheat and gluten sensitive, but now I got to wonder, well, what about dairy and corn and the other grains that are cross-reactive? Boy, I wish I would have gotten that data, right? And it's more cost effective to order all those Zoomers as a bundle than ordering the wheat Zoomer by itself.
So you're saying that it's a forever thing on the gluten to avoid, but what about dairy if it shows up on dairy? I mean, do you have to be dairy free forever? And that's cow dairy we tested. You could test
that's cow dairy. Yeah.
I mean, that's the hard one for people to probably absorb, that like forever ever. What if I go to Italy, and what if I go to France and I still can't do any of this?
Just go to Greece where they don't have cows. They just have goats.
Yeah, that's true.
They got some great cheese, man. Well, you know, it's an interesting question, and I don't think we have that completely answered yet. You know, all of that research is kind of happening in real time, but we do know that gluten is forever. And we do know that there are strong cross reactivities between corn and dairy and gluten, and we can verify whether or not you have those things. So then the question is, all right, well, if gluten is forever, and if the immune system looks at corn and goes, oh, that's gluten, does that mean corn is forever? Well, logic would say yes, right? Just your basic common sense would say, yeah, if your immune system thinks that every time you eat corn, you're eating gluten, or same thing about dairy, you probably should not ever eat those things again, you know? But can I say with 100% certainty that that's true? No, but that's the best practice. That's what I would always recommend. Hey, if you can, be corn, dairy, and gluten-free. My house is corn, dairy, and gluten-free, my whole house. And that's just the way we live.
But I think it is like sometimes you're going to go out to eat dinner, and how can you, because it's not realistic to eat at home in a safe place all the time, because like I'm going out tonight actually with Reed. We're going gluten-free restaurant, but it's not gluten-free kitchen. So like I'm going to go take my gluten enzyme pills that I can take before I eat, and digestive enzymes, and kind of be preventative. But what are some things you find that are important to do if you are eating out at a restaurant, because we are still going to hopefully live life and be social?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I think the enzymes are super important. I would say take both Wheat Rescue and Glutenza. Okay, both of them. because they're going to break down, studies suggest they're going to break down 90% of the corn and the dairy proteins that you might come into contact with too, in addition to the gluten. So they're kind of all encompassing, even though they're marketed specific for gluten. They really do a good job at all of those inflammatory proteins. So take them both every time you go out for dinner. You know, if you're in a new town, it's a little harder. You just have to, my rule is, if the restaurant doesn't have gluten-free options on the menu, I don't even go there, because they don't have the language for it. They don't even, right? They don't have the awareness, or otherwise they will put it on their menu. So, and then you need to just talk to the kitchen staff, you know, or to your wait staff. Hey, do you have protocols in place in the kitchen to reduce the risk of cross-contamination? You're never going to eliminate it, right? But ask them, what kinds of things are they trained to do to reduce the risk? You know, I understand you can't guarantee me anything, but I'd like to know what your practices are. If you're talking about going out to dinner in your hometown, that's a little easier to do if you just like identify those 2 or 3 places that you really love to go. You develop relationships with the people, you know their practices, they know you. You have certain things that you order that you like, you have experience. If you have enough experience not getting contaminated there, right, then you know that it's a pretty safe place. So a lot of it is just trial and error, but get really good at just asking open, transparent questions of the wait staff, right? And doing your homework ahead of time. Don't ever go into a restaurant blind. At least go on Google and look at the menu and have a plan, right? And maybe the only thing you get to have is, you know, a steak and some steamed broccoli. Yeah. You know, so.
Yeah. So the one other thing I was going to say, there's a Find Me app I found, Find Me Gluten Free. So you can use it and it shows you where you are. So I used that last weekend when we were out of town. But I think it's also how to explain it to people without being made fun of, because people go like, oh, well, you don't have celiac, you're not going to die. So who cares? You know, you're just being paranoid.
So this is the only time I would ever encourage people to lie. You just say, I have celiac disease. This is medically necessary.
Yeah, I thought that.
You don't have to, show a card. You don't have to prove it. Just, I have celiac disease. Because you're right, you can't spend time wading through their perspective of whether or not your condition is serious, right? You got to just speak the language that they are going to react to appropriately.
True. Just say celiac, because that makes some more people know, oh, no gluten in anything. You know, I'll make sure I check everything. Because if you say gluten, I'm reactive to gluten, it causes immune response in my body. They're like, what? Who cares? Yeah,
that's too many words, Debbie.
Well, I don't say that, but that's kind of what I've been finding to friends to say, because they're like, oh, you're full of crap. You know, people in Italy eat wheat every day and they're fine.
But you know, in Italy, they screen everyone for celiac disease.
Do they really?
Yep.
Wow. See, different. It's different over there.
Yeah.
So anyways, I know we're out of time, but where can everyone find you? You have a great program people can run through to learn more and to.
Sure. Yeah, I'm at Whitney Morgan Nutrition. You can find me at morgannutrition.com. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn as Whitney Morgan Nutrition. I specialize in Hashimoto's and thyroid stuff. That's kind of my jam. And so if folks are interested in learning more about optimizing thyroid health, I have a YouTube channel. And of course, all my stuff gets replayed on IGTV. And I think I gave you the link for a free download, which is my thyroid lab test interpretation guide. Yeah. So they can go to my website and download that and learn a little bit more about how to understand their own thyroid lab, so that when their doctor says everything looks normal, they can actually look at it and see whether or not that's true. That's important to understand your own lab work.
Yeah, I think that is so important for everyone to get done, because I find it just from my own experience, and it's just amazing what is in those labs that you can get to really be healthy and feel your best every day, versus just, wait till they're like horrible in the function or what is their normal ranges,
right,
from the doctor's perspective.
Right. And just like you did, I run these labs on everyone. right? So anyone that I work with, I'm running a batch of Zoomers, and I'm doing gut tests and adrenals and thyroid and, you know, the whole works. So I think that's really important, which is why, you know, we feel really strongly about the work that we do, you know, that we need to get the data and, you know, treat everyone according to their unique needs, right? Because no one's data is the same. Their diagnosis might be the same, but their data is never the same, right? Everyone needs something different.
Yeah. And hopefully people start to keep getting these messages to know, like, all right, you know, what I'm doing now, is it helping me for my future self? And if I want to live my best life, here are actions I need to take now, not wait until later when you're really struggling.
Yeah, because if you wait till later, it just takes longer to reverse engineer that stuff, you know?
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah.
That's why I do what I do, right?
That's right.
Like, we don't want to have people have to wait. They could fix it in 6 months, not have it years to feel their best.
I hear you. I mean, that's why I do what I do. It's like, I don't want people to spend 15 years like I did trying to get my health back. That's crazy.
Yeah. I know. And I think all of us practitioners, we all have similar stories of struggling for years, and, you know, led us to FDN being a practitioner because we wanted to feel like this is my purpose now, to help people avoid going through what I done.
Absolutely.
And I feel like my niche is the athlete, the driven, ambitious, high performing athlete, because that's what I used to be.
Yeah.
And that, you know, where I went from up here to down at the bottom, that, you know, it didn't have to happen. So
exactly. Yeah.
People can learn. So thanks so much for your time and knowledge. And you're always so knowledgeable about everything. So I love to pick your brain and dive into things. So anytime
thanks
you want
for
to come
having
back
me. It was fun. Let's do it again.
All right. Anytime.
All righty.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us to continue to grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.